Hi everyone, good to be with you once again, make another video here, and this one has been on my mind also today, and it has to do with communication. And I rest this upon a passage in Matthew's Gospel, the 7th chapter and the 12th verse. It's known as the Golden Rule. If you know it, you may know it according to the King James Version, but this modern rendering says, "Whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets." Whatever you want others to do to you, how you want to be treated, well, treat others the same way. Even non-believers and people who are skeptical about God would often admit this is a great way to live. As you want to be treated, treat others the same way. And I would venture to say most Christians would wholeheartedly agree with it, that that's the way to live, that that's the foundation of how they are living, they might say. I follow this rule. And yet, like so many things, we can easily lose sight of these fundamental principles of Christian morality and living. And I want to specifically speak about communication and phone communication, and challenge the notion that we are still following this rule as Christians with our phone communication much of the time. What do I mean by that? Well, I want to specifically talk about texting and calling people, phone etiquette. I grew up in a time when we had landlines. There were no cell phones. In fact, I can remember sitting in a store and using a cell phone for this first time, and I was just amazed, and I was chuckling as I was trying to make the first call in a store in a public place because it seemed so strange to me. I know that might seem wild to you who have grown up with cell phones and everything at their disposal, but for me, this was wild and new and odd because I grew up in a time where there was just landlines. I grew up before there were even answering machines. Can you imagine? No voicemail. And so when you called somebody's house, the phone would ring and there weren't all kinds of ringtones. There was just one ringer, and it was loud and clear. Now somebody might have 3 or 4 phones in their house, or they might have one phone in their house, but it was landline to landline, right? And so you'd call them, and you expected them to answer the phone if they were home, and that's the way it usually worked. If our phone rang, we were glad to get a call. This was before, again, all the cold calling and the constant barrage of solicitors that we have nowadays. There were some, I'm sure, but back then, you would call your friend would call you, you'd call your relative, whatever it might be, you'd call a business, and they would pick up the phone. And so I grew up in a time when that was just expected and natural. Now it's not assumed or natural or expected at all. In fact, we feel as Christians, and I'm talking again mostly, I think, to Christians, we don't feel obliged to even answer our phones anymore. Some of us never, ever answer our phones. And we feel that that's perfectly acceptable. I want to challenge that thought. If we're not careful, we become very selfish and self-absorbed and self-centered. And we speak only when we want to speak to other people. Now I ask you, is that the way of Jesus? Did Jesus only talk to those he wanted to talk to? When someone calls us, they want to talk to us. Again, I grew up before even caller ID, so I didn't know who was calling when the phone would ring. But whoever was close to the phone, they would answer it. Can you even imagine again? When someone calls, though, they're calling for some kind of reason, and they want to talk. And nowadays, we screen the calls, or we just ignore them and check our voicemail later on in the day, or even days and weeks later. And some of us have no intention of returning any voicemail. What am I getting at here? I'm simply saying that our orientation is much of the time, as professing Christians, self-centered. I answer the phone only if I feel like answering the phone, and it really doesn't matter who it is. It might be my mother, my father, my brother, my cousin, or my friend next door. It doesn't matter. I do the calling, and I answer only if I feel like answering. I'm really challenging that way of handling the phone nowadays. And I'm saying that orientation is fundamentally selfish and self-centered. So what am I saying? If you're going to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, you want to be treated fairly, you want to be treated with respect, answer your phone. And then, of course, nowadays we don't put the ringer on even. That is a choice. And you say, well, if I was to put my ringer on, it would be ringing all the time. Well, then turn the ringer down a bit. Whatever you need to do, however you need to adjust it, be a person that answers their phone. Don't say, please leave a message and I'll call you back as soon as I can, with no intention of calling back. That's saying something that's not true. If you have no intention of calling people back, the least you can do is not have any voice message greeting saying you're going to call them back, because you're not going to do that. Let's get more specific here. Let's talk about texting. Texting is something that, in my view, is becoming really almost a plague. And it is something that can be used supplementally, but in my view should never be the dominant way of communication. Well, it's easy, and I live a busy life. Yes, yes, yes. Well, I would just ask at that point, was Jesus ever busy? I'm a busy person. That means I'm an important person, and so I find it much more convenient to text. I'm sure you do. Again, notice the orientation. I find it more convenient for me to text. Texting should be a secondary means of communication, if you use it, I would say, and for simple purposes. Your primary means of communication should be by voice. Now, I realize this is very opinionated, but I think it still is the practical working out of what Jesus is telling us when he says, treat other people like you would like to be treated. When a person calls you again, they have a reason, however slight, however important, to talk to you, and they want to talk to you. They want to hear a voice. Now, I think of when I speak with my family, or I want to speak with my family, or I want to speak with other people that I know especially, I want to talk as a human being to another human being. I want to hear their voice. I'm not looking at their face unless I've got, that capability on my smartphone. I want to look still at their face when I'm talking to them one-on-one, but if I'm on the phone, I want to hear their voice. That's important. Texting, again, is cold and impersonal. And again, we have to watch out for the selfish orientation behind so much of this. It is impersonal. It is not personal. If I call you on the phone and you always take me right to voicemail, and then you respond 8 hours later with a text, that's very cold and impersonal. Now, I'm speaking obviously from personal experience here, and I don't want this to be a gripe session. But I think this is the fact of the matter with all of us. If I'm calling you. I want to hear your voice on the other end of the line. I don't want to text back. The person that chooses to text all the time is not facing something. I don't necessarily know what that is. Sometimes I think there are fears, F-E-A-R, fears behind not talking one-on-one with another human being. We are being pushed more and more towards isolation. Even as you go in to a fast food restaurant, you're encouraged to type in your food order rather than go to the counter. I was in the Taco Bell the other day with my grandkids, and she said, "Papa, aren't you going to use the screen here?" And I said, "No, I want to talk to a human being." That's where we're headed. We're headed towards isolationism and less interpersonal exchange. That is not good. We are social beings, and God designed us this way, and we should continue to be social beings. We need social interaction. And the person that is avoiding that, in my view, is some way or another most likely hiding something, not facing something, not dealing with something in their own life, in their own mind and heart. And I would challenge that person to get out of that habit of always texting. There's another one where it touches down in terms of special days. It's your birthday. You know what's great? It's when you get a call from a loved one that's far away and they say, "Happy birthday," right? They don't expect them necessarily to drive several hours and show up at your door, but a call is nice. A card, you remember those things? Birthday cards. Those are nice too. But nothing, again, is quite as good as a call. A birthday text, "Happy birthday," with all kinds of emojis and things all over them, and hearts and all these things, bells and whistles, just doesn't do it. If you haven't got 3 minutes to talk on the phone and wish your loved one happy birthday, or perhaps happy anniversary, or whatever it might be, a special occasion. Here's another one. Merry Christmas, Happy Easter. Then you're too busy. And then, of course, the response is, "Well, you know, I haven't got a half hour to talk." Well, you can control that thing to a large extent. You can make a 2-minute call. You can make a 5-minute call. You can do it. You can do it. Make the phone call, and don't send a little, I want to add, cowardly text to avoid your responsibility. See, much of this has to do with really refusing to face our responsibilities as adults. I don't expect any of this good behavior from an 8-year-old, but someone who is an adult and a parent and a grandparent should know better than this. Call them and tell them you love them, and tell them happy birthday or whatever it might be, and Merry Christmas, and chat for a minute. Don't just send a cold text and do your obligatory thing and call it good. It is not good. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Here's another one too, and I've got so many areas as I'm thinking here, and I jotted down some notes here. When people call you, call them back. When people call you, call them back. Well, you already said that. Well, I didn't exactly say that. What I'm saying is you need to respond to people's messages. You need to try to answer the phone, and if you can't answer the phone, call them back. And call them back as soon as you are able. Not next day, 3 days later. What does that tell you, by the way, if you don't call another person back? If you make this call and it's somebody close to you and you don't hear back from them, what does that feel like? It feels like they don't care about you. They don't care. What if they call you 3 days later? Low priority. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Do you want others to feel like they really don't matter to you? Then just don't call them back. Send them a little basic text. Refuse to talk to them on the phone one-on-one. Never call. There's another one, right? Leave all the calling to the other person. If you want to have a relationship, and if you want to say that you love another person, then treat them with love. Don't just send them little cold messages, which can, by the way, be misconstrued. Talk to them. Tell them you love them and appreciate them. Before you know it, they may be gone and out of your life. This is love. You see, this is the way of the Christian. It has to do with people and involvement with people. People are more important than much of your busy activities. People, relationships. Spend time with them. Talk with those who mean so much to you, or you claim mean so much to you. And you'll be happier in the long run. And you'll be, again, living like Jesus told us to live. Peace and blessings once again to you.